It was during, let's call it the pre-digital camera era, when I first solo hiked up Telescope Peak. I knew little about the trail other than what I saw on the map, and that didn't look so hard. I suffered for my ignorance. The trail was steep. The high altitude felt devoid of oxygen. I didn't bring enough water. But I made it. Check that mountain off the list. And so why did I want to go back there all these years later? Getting to the trailhead involves driving up an occasionally rough, dusty road that's usually passable for passenger cars. Generally speaking, you should have no problem making it at least to what are called the Wildrose Charcoal Kilns. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention these oddball structures that you pass on your way to the trailhead. These kilns were built in 1877 to produce charcoal from the local pinyon pines. And that went to a lead and silver mine about 25 miles from here. The charcoal was then burned in furnaces as part of the smelter process. And now you know. The last 1.5 miles are steep, windy, and rocky. If that makes you uncomfortable, you can always park at the bottom and walk up the extra distance. High clearance vehicles, especially four-wheel drive ones, no problem. I've put directions for both options in the description. All I can say is when I first did this, I believed the signs and walked up. It wasn't necessary. At the top is Mahogany Flat, a free campground with 9 sites, picnic tables, a toilet, and not much more. After my long drive from Los Angeles, I decided to camp there so I could get an early start the next day. The luxuries of car camping when you can bring a full-size pillow. There's a small parking area at the trailhead. Elevation, a smidge less than 8,200 feet. The sign says 7 miles to the peak, but my GPS knocked a half mile off that. Whoever did the sign must have rounded up. From here, the path immediately goes up for 2 miles, rarely leveling out as it traverses the slopes of Rogers Peak, part of the Panoramic mountain range. Across from us is Death Valley, and beyond that, the Amargosa Range. Whew. Went a half mile before realizing and put on any sunscreen. Now let's get the warnings out of the way. First, despite this being one of the hottest places on Earth, Telescope Peak in the winter is snowy and icy. If that doesn't dissuade you from hiking it, don't go without an ice axe and even crampons. On the opposite extreme, it gets hot here during the summer, even at this altitude. So always bring at least a gallon of water. Okay, I'm finished. Eventually, you reach a saddle just below Rogers Peak, where there is telecommunications and other equipment. Interestingly, some of the gear up there is owned by the Department of Defense and the FBI. On my first trip, I climbed to the top when the installation wasn't quite so snazzy as it is today. From here, the trail eases up, even descending a bit. If you wanted to camp, it's now allowed. But keep in mind, there's no water.
Now along the way we pass limber pines. Now I can't speak for this particular tree, but it could be old as 2,000 years. That's pretty impressive, right? Ha! This ancient bristlecone laughs at the idea that 2,000 years is old. My gosh, that it could have been middle age for this guy who could be twice that age. Unfortunately, as amazing as it is that anything could survive in this nasty environment, the current drought has been slowly killing these trees. Seems a small brown beetle called a pinyon ips has infiltrated the groves here. Add in the stress from lack of water, and the bugs went to work. In 2018, 60 to 70% of the trees had died or were dying. And the ultimate culprit here, global warming, of course.
Once we pass the saddle, we're now crossing the slopes of Bennett Peak with views down to Panoramic Valley. And for about 2 miles, it seems as though this is turning into an easy hike. Well, until we realize that peak in front of us is Telescope, and it looks like there's a healthy climb in our future. Fortunately, you can take your mind off that as the trail starts to offer panoramas to the east and west, both available by simply turning your head from one direction to the next. And then the ridgeline we're on starts up, the trail turning rocky and sometimes loose. The number of ancient bristlecone trees multiply on the steep slope, making the way at least picturesque. Then, just as it appears we're going straight up, we hit a series of switchbacks. Look at it this way. You're nearing the top. We round a slope below what turns out to be a false summit, and there's the official peak.
Yay! I made it.
The feeling was the same when I first hiked here. Now, I might have looked relaxed, but I was also dead tired. As a reward, it appears that no point in California or Nevada is outside our view. With the caveat that you need a clear day, you can see to Mount Whitney and the Sierra Mountains. And I wonder if I was here at night, I might see Las Vegas.
Let's do a little math. Our destination is Telescope Peak, which is the highest point in Death Valley at 11,043 feet. Remember that number. Okay, as you look out from the summit, you can see a point below us that's 11,331 feet lower. Wait a minute, that's a 282-foot difference. Maybe it's not a math problem so much as a geography quiz. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Just below us is Badwater Basin, which is the lowest point in the U.S. at minus 282 feet. And that's why when you stand atop Telescope Peak, you are actually higher, as measured from the bottom up, than the official summit's elevation. The route back to the trailhead is as simple as following the trail we took to get here. As the light changes in the late afternoon, I realize that coming back so many years later needs no rationale other than the joy of reliving the glorious vistas one gets from this trail. One last word of advice. When you pass the ancient bristlecones, pat them on the bark. Encourage them to hang in there despite those miserable beetles, and say you'll be back. even if it's 30 years from now. To a 1,000-year-old tree, that won't be much of a wait. So, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Just to let you know, I post one hike each week. And in the meantime, go to the woods, no matter who you are.